is the meeting is being recorded, and so anyone who does not want their video recorded, you can shut off your camera, member of the public, and we will make the recorded meetings, they're available the following week, accessible from our website. So let's begin with general public comments. If there's anyone in the public who would like to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand. It's like we just have Eileen and Jim Higgins. Everybody froze. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was having some internet problems this morning. Okay, so it looks like there are no general public comments. So we'll move on to the meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Yes, Cindy, I have one.
Yes.
Top of page 3, where we're talking about the budget, and it says public comment. I think that should say public hearing in the top left box.
Okay, right, because it was a public hearing on the budget.
And further, I'll add that if we're going to discuss this today, and if there are any changes, I would suggest that we might open and close the public hearing today as well, since we tabled it last time.
Agreed. Yes, agreed. I made a note. Thank you for pointing that out.
I also have a correction.
Yes.
Bottom of page 1, public comment. About in the middle of the paragraph, I think we just need to reword that about question regarding how science research is done and how the information disseminated to the public. It just sounds funny.
Okay. Got it. Anyone else?
On page 3, under discussion, about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way down, it says Krista emphasized that October is the deadline to submit. It says agenda, but I think it means should be budget to the council.
Got it. So on my screen, Tanya is frozen. Lincoln is frozen. I'm just checking, is it just my screen, or I wanted to make sure that she was able to receive the corrections we just made. She can hear. Okay. All right. Thank you, Tanya. Okay, are there any other corrections from commissioners or staff?
Doug Strandberg doesn't have any corrections?
No, I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh, okay.
That's why.
That's one way to do it. That's
Okay, so if
I wonder if
ahead.
anyone would have said
Oh.
anything if you'd had corrections, Doug.
Okay, so if there are no further corrections, then the minutes are approved. Moving on to chair and commissioner reports.
Well, this is, it's not directly related to the land bank, but so the annual docket process kind of just reached the end stage where the county council had a public hearing and approved some of the proposed amendments to the code for upcoming changes that the planning department will do. And one of those adopted amendments was something that I and some of the land bank staff had commented on and worked on for tree protection in the county for trees that are outside the shoreline areas and critical areas. So, which means that some of the big trees and groves of trees that give the island some of its characteristic look and feel and function are hopefully going to have a little more protection and can't just be cut down at will. So I think it's a good move for everybody, and it's kind of complementary to what we do.
Good one, Miles. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Any other commissioners with reports or announcements? Okay, I'll make one. There are two commissioner positions or terms coming to an end at the end of the year. So we will have two positions open. One, the at-large on Orcas, that's Brian, and the other one is Doug's position on San Juan. And I know it's not on the county website yet, but especially in light of the strong support that we received for having a more diverse commission, I just want to make sure that we get the word out early enough, and the voices that we may want to pull in our traditional people who maybe are already connected with the land bank. And the two in particular that received high marks from the Polis survey was a member of the Indigenous community and also a farmer, regenerative oriented farmer. So I don't know the procedure, if we can even add that into it, or if we just need to be networking and kind of putting the word out. I would suggest to maybe the Ag Resources Committee that they should be made aware that a position is coming open. And I don't know if there are any connections that we have with Indigenous folks in the area, but I think we should make a proactive effort to see what we can come up with.
Sandy, I'd like to comment on that. The first comment is that for anybody listening, I intend to re-up. So hopefully that position won't be open. The second is that regarding the composition of the commission, other than reviewing the recommendations, I don't think that we've ever discussed that. And we need to before we take any action on that.
Okay, good point.
And if Doug Strandberg is not going to re-up, and I'm not sure if I know that or not, then we need to, if he were to be stepping away, then we need to think that it might be good to have another attorney on board as well.
Let me address that, Jim. I have indicated to Lincoln that I was not going to re-up, although I've received some support to do that. I certainly wouldn't mind, spending another year or two, but for a full term, I do not see that. I have reached out to one attorney that I think would be extremely well qualified, but so far she has not agreed to put her name in, but I'm still working on that. She would be a good choice. And I think we all ought to continue to look for people. I believe also that the land bank as it exists right now is a very diverse group. And I look at diversity in part from where people come from and what their background is. For example, having a Sandy on as a realtor that has always been important. And so I think that when we come to talking about diversity, I think that the number one important thing about diversity is where people come from, what background they have. And I think that, over my 10 years, we've had just a great diverse bunch of people. And I think we've been well served that way.
Maybe Sandy or Lincoln, for the benefit of the recording, and then anybody who's on that doesn't know, could we give a quick summary of what the process is for addressing vacancies or openings on the commission?
I can do that. Basically, we will be advertising. Ordinarily, the council would advertise open positions, but I think since the clerk lost her assistant position, that's been difficult. So I think we'll just go ahead and advertise for the openings and invite people to apply in that way. Ordinarily, it's not like we get a flood of people who apply for these positions. So it is a matter of going, trying to think of people who might be good fits and asking them. The way the process works, once you have applicants, if there is the sitting commissioner wants to continue, typically that's what happens. If there's a question of term limits, and there are other applicants, then there's consideration given to that. And usually the way that all works is that we being me and a commissioner from the island or district where the opening is, will interview candidates together with a council member from that district. And out of that meeting, there'll come a recommendation. It's also possible for the chair of the commission to make a recommendation, but typically out of that meeting, there's consensus, and then that nomination is advanced to council with that in mind, and they vote on it. Is that
So, yes, I think so, right, Krista? So I would, since this wasn't an agenda item and it seems that it's worthy of some discussion, perhaps we could put it on for, let's see, next month, or come back to it if we have, well, I guess we are ahead of schedule here. So if nobody's opposed, we could go ahead and have a discussion now and still remain on schedule for this meeting.
Well, I would first thing I would say would be I would plead with Doug Strandberg to stay. That's it right there.
Okay, any other comments or points of discussion?
Well, it sounds like Lincoln is gonna advertise the positions as, and that's foregone conclusion that's gonna happen. So we should probably just wait and see if anybody puts their name in and address it at that point. I don't know, Lincoln, when you say there's typically not a flood of people, does that mean there's normally nobody or what?
I would say it ranges from 0 to maybe 4.
Okay. So when do you put the notice out?
We'll be advertising as soon as we can here.
Okay. So maybe my next meeting will have an idea if anybody's put their name in.
Yeah, and if you have ideas about people who might make sense, I would strongly encourage them to attend the next meeting or the next 2 meetings, so that they get a better idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
And now that they're recorded, they can go back and watch some. So that's a nice thing to have available.
So I didn't look at, I think, so Brian, have you done 2 terms?
No, I think I've done a term and a partial term.
Oh,
So
okay,
I-
all right.
Eligible. Yeah. And I have a
And-
question about that. I guess I'd like to ask Lincoln. If, as you say, a sitting commissioner intends to re-up and that appointment is usually honored, is advertising the position then just a requirement of transparency or whatnot? Because and if it is, I understand that, but if not, you're advertising a position that's really not available, and you might disappoint some people.
Well, that's a good question. I'll have to look at the council policy, or I guess it's in the form of an ordinance, and get back to you on that. So yeah, if we see that and there's a sitting commissioner who is eligible, I'll take a look at that and see if we really need to advertise it.
I think that is kind of an interesting situation, because I think in the spirit of transparency, which is, I did read through all the 200 statements and look at all the red and green lines from the survey. And I'd be curious to look at what is in the ordinance to see. I'd be surprised if it automatically seats an incumbent without any input or any new people considered for the position. So in the spirit of being open, I think I know there's value to having a returning commissioner come back just because of their history and their experience. And that being said, I think it is a closed shop if we don't actually open up those positions to new people. I'm not comfortable with an automatic seating of an incumbent commissioner. But I'll wait to see what Lincoln finds out.
Yes, Lincoln, could after the meeting, when you find the exact language, could it get distributed via
Sure.
email so that we all have it? I'm sure it's in our manual, but as far as so that we're not all looking for it.
Yeah, that may not be part of something that's actually
Part of
in-
our manual might be at the county level. Okay, so depending on what that comes back with, and I am deeply grateful for those commissioners who do agree to continue to serve beyond one term. I also think that that just continuing exactly how we are, that we need to be open to new ideas and people and be responsive to the community. And we may want to consider that these next two positions that come open will also be taking us through a renewal campaign, and that it might be beneficial to be tapped into another realm of constituents that haven't really had representation. So just some things to think about. I don't think we should necessarily agree to do something just the way it's always been done. Let's find out what the requirements are, and then maybe we can bring it back for, I'm actually not sure if it's something that, I don't know if this really is a topic for the commission to discuss or not. I'm a little unsure if it's a conflict of interest for the commission to discuss. Yes, Brian.
Sandy, I have an additional thought and a suggestion. I don't disagree with anything that's been said, and particularly I agree with what Krista said about openness and transparency, which is why I asked the question in the first place. But maybe this would be a compromise that we could kind of satisfy both sides of that argument. If a position is technically open, and if the land bank advertises it, perhaps as part of that advertisement, we could make a note that there is a sitting commissioner who intends to re-up if appointed, just to alert people so they won't, go on a fool's errand unless they want to.
When you say re-up, do you mean reapply? Do you mean
Yeah, to
I guess-
continue on. The position.
Okay. So I think our next step should be to find out what the rules are. Thanks for that. Thanks for that suggestion. Okay. Anything else on this subject? I do recall that a few years ago, and I'd have to recheck the minutes, that we had some discussion about this. It was after, I think it was after Jim got reappointed, and did we have a discussion about maybe at the time, I don't remember. There was something about the advertisement. It seems
was
like the
after
commission
that
has
Amanda
talked about
quit.
this. What was that?
It was after Amanda left.
After
And-
Amanda
and
left. Okay, right. And we,
When David was appointed, yeah.
okay. Got it. Okay. All right. So anyways, so as not to wait till December to have the conversation, we can bring it back in November if once Lincoln has found the wording. But we encourage everybody to keep an open mind on how we approach it. Okay.
Sandy?
Yes.
I think the
yes,
discussion the discussion a couple months ago, whenever David came on, was more arm wrestling to see who got the extra seat, either Orcas or San Juan. It wasn't so much, I don't think the process
yes.
of incumbents, but it's that extra seat. Does San Juan get 3 commissioners, or was Orcas entitled to 3 commissioners? So I think that's kind of where
Yes.
the
Yes.
chatting came in.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that clarification. Okay, so moving on, Christine Minnie, Councillor Christine Minnie is here to give us an update. Thanks for joining us, Christine.
You're welcome. I am once again in my car. Either I'm in my car or I'm traveling on every Friday, it appears. Today I am sitting in the parking lot of the Oral Surgery Center in Anacortes while my son is having his wisdom
Oh.
teeth removed. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry that I've missed the last two meetings, but I'm happy to be here today. Let's see, I'll start by saying that recently the county did hire a new parks and fair director. His name is Brandon Cadwell, and he comes to us from the National Park Service. He's lived in or on San Juan Island for about 5 years. I think he has a lot to bring to the table, and I hope you all have the opportunity to meet him if you haven't already. The interview and hiring process is well underway for our next DCD director. The search is well underway for our next county manager, but it is certainly a small pool of qualified candidates and a very large challenge under the many hurdles that exist for those who may move to San Juan County at this point. So that is definitely a very large focus right now, but it's a slow move. 2 weeks ago, council committed $270,000 of our American Rescue Plan funding to emergent childcare needs for all 3 main islands, as well as $20,000 to each family resource center on all those same islands. Excuse me. There is currently a process called redistricting happening in the state. It happens every 10 years based on census data, and it is meant to level the playing field of each district in terms of population distribution. The Redistricting Commission currently has 4 proposed maps, and you can find them on their website. 2 of these maps move the 40th legislative district east, and which moves San Juan County into the 10th legislative district. I think that the unfortunate part of that is that we would lose our current legislators, Rammel, Lekanoff, and Lovelet. And council has sent a letter to the Redistricting Commission and have participated in public testimony to support the proposed maps that keep us in the 40th district. Oh, fun one. At Tuesday's council meeting, we awarded $2.6 million from the county's home fund to several local affordable housing projects, again, on all 3 islands. I did notice on the agenda, county COVID vaccine requirements under my name. And I think that I will say that in its simplest form, individuals, both staff and volunteers, must be fully vaccinated by October 31st. There is the opportunity for exemption. There is medical and or religious exemption potential, and accommodations for those exemptions will be made on a case-by-case basis. And it because that is an agenda item, if anybody has questions, maybe more in depth, I'd be happy to take them.
Nope.
Thank
I've already
you.
I've sent my card photos in, and I'm ready for a half a Moderna 3rd dose, and rock and roll.
Thank you, Jim. And if there's no questions about that, or if there still are, of course, I'm still here. But then if anybody has any questions about anything I said prior to that.
Christine, I put that on the agenda and I assigned it to you. You're welcome.
Yeah. I don't, you know what? I feel very comfortable in the conversation.
Well, I did send out a notification to all of the commissioners about the requirements. So this is just kind of a reminder for folks.
Thank you. If nothing else, I have to sign some paperwork in the office. Apparently, my son's standing out in the rain signaling me.
Oh, okay.
But I'm happy to answer any other questions.
My, but you can go. I was just wondering if you had any comments on our discussion earlier about advertising advertising a commission position when a commissioner's term is up and they're interested in reauthorizing, and do they go back into the same pool of applicants and everybody is competing, or how does that work? Do we give preference? Is there a county policy?
I cannot tell you at this point that there is. I have not had
Okay.
that experience yet. When a candidate comes to council, it is either reappointment or new appointment, but we have not been involved in the process of up until that point. So I have not had the experience. However, what Krista said spoke, really clearly to me. I appreciated the fact that she saw the need to not have a closed shop, so to speak. And so I look forward to finding that out as well. I think it's really important.
Great, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
For you, but more directly to Lincoln. Do we want Christine back for any discussion on the biennium budget? Would
Well,
that be helpful?
I think that could be quite helpful. If Christine, if you have the opportunity to come back after signing your
Oh
life
yeah,
away.
I intend, absolutely. I intend to be in the meeting wholly. I'll just be gone for a few minutes. And then I will also have to, depending on how long it takes for the teeth to come out, go in and bring them out under the influence.
It's a good time to find out information you wanted to know.
So, but I will be here as much as I absolutely can, and I won't be gone that long.
Great.
Thank you. And thanks for bringing that up, Krista.
Thanks, Christine.
Moving on, we'll have the financial update from, there he is, Aaron.
All right. Hi, everybody.
Good. Okay. And this is a quarterly update, right? That's what we're on that schedule. Okay.
Yep. This is the quarterly update that will be the only one I will be providing now, is just quarterly. So I will share my screen. Okay, if everyone can see. This is the first time I've done the screen share.
We can see it, but we can't read. Can you enlarge it, please?
Yeah, that's luckily why I provided them in PDF form to everyone, so you have those in front of you as well. First, I'd like to start off with total current. This is the third quarter of 2021 financial statement for the Conservation Area Fund as well as the Stewardship Management Fund. First, we will start with the Conservation Area Fund. Start off with total current assets increased by 669,770 compared to last year, or last quarter's increase. Most of this is due to the phenomenal REIT that we have been receiving to this point this year. REIT can be reflected here on the right-hand side. To date, we are currently at 4,947,109. This is 164% over budget, which was set at 3 million. As you guys are aware of and have approved the fourth amended budget, we have increased that number to 5.5 million to reflect a more realistic projection for the end of the year. This is also 39%, almost 40% over where we were at this point last year, which, given last year's significant increase in REIT, we are above that threshold at this point. When we get down to the profit and loss statement here at the bottom, major items of notice are the fact that we have made our third quarter transfer to stewardship operations according to the revised 2021 budget at 403,347. We have also made the payment, the transfer to the back to stewardship for the interfund loan for the purchase of Lester at Katy Mountain. That was a $565,000 loan from the stewardship fund that we paid back in full with interest at 3%, which amounted in $6,450. And we are proud of that, given the fact that the interest rate that we are receiving from LGIP, the local government investment pool, is sitting at 0.09% compared to last year, which was not a whole lot better at 0.2%. So we are able to increase interest and provide more funds to stewardship through that action. Now I will move on to the stewardship and management fund. Again, cash, total current assets increased by 665,000. That is a lot larger than normal, and that is due to the interfund loan payback from the conservation area fund that I had just spoken about, and that will go back into the endowment fund. Let's see if there's anything else significant here. So yes, down here in the profit and loss statement, this 565,000 is reflected there. The transfer to stewardship for our quarterly site enhancement was made. This sale of surplus for 637 is from a gangway that was over on Fisherman Bay Spit, kind of just sitting out there in the grass that we were able to put up for public auction and was purchased by a local on Lopez Island. So that was the first experience we had with doing a public auction through the county. Let's see. Stewardship, management, and maintenance, everything is on track through the third quarter compared to budget. We did increase the budget for management and maintenance and stewardship in the fourth amended budget, which was approved. So there will be significant fourth quarter spending, but that is not reflected here. This amended budget is based on the third amended, since we have not, the fourth amendment has not gone through council approval at this point. That is all I have for you for the third quarter financial report.
Aaron,
Yes.
Jim Skog here. I'm wondering, I don't have the bond market right in front of me, although I'm trying to bring it up. on my computer, but it seems like with LGIP, that 0.0929, that we should be able to find, as we have in the past, some T-bills or CDs or something that would perform better than that, that we can do a ladder with. I'm wondering if we're looking at that.
We were and we are. There have been meetings with Rhonda from the Treasurer's Office, a member from TVI Investments who Rhonda recommended, as well as Lincoln and Doug. We all had a meeting and discussed options, and then went back to TVI to work up some options for us. And we did this, I believe, 3 or 4 months ago. And at that point, what we received back was really not too much better. The options that were available to us, I mean, went up to maybe 0.5% for how much we would have to invest from what we had, where I believe at the time we decided to put the pause on that, given the fact that we were working on some potential acquisitions, and it was just the decision at the time that we were going to sit on that between, from conversations with Lincoln and Doug Stramberg. So at this point, we're kind of just holding off and seeing what other options might be out there.
Well, in my math, in my doing of the math, 0.5% is
I
better.
can't
than
really hear you, Jim. I'm sorry.
I'm saying if in my doing of the math, 0.5% even is significantly better than 0.09.
Correct.
We
Yep.
can take a look again, Jim.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Aaron? Okay. All right, so we will, thank you, Aaron, for that comprehensive review. So Lincoln, you'll be leading the, moving on to the budget proposals for 2022 and 2023.
Yes.
Okay. I got confused because my Hollywood squares completely reordered. Everybody's in a different place. But there you are.
All right. Can you all see this?
Yep.
Brian?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is the Conservation Area Fund proposed 22-23 budget. I don't think there's a whole lot in here that raised questions the last time, but I'll go through it a bit. A few things that you might want to note, just that our current projection here of rate 5.5, we probably will end up above that. But for 22 and 23, we're taking a conservative approach. So knocking that back down to 4, and then I think that's a 3% increase or something like that. So who knows? That's just quite conservative estimate. The other thing I'll note, and I think we covered this, but these two numbers here, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Not at all. Well, best laid plans. I'm not sure how to get out of this, actually. But anyway, I was going to
Undo.
talk about these two numbers. Those are for sale of conservation easements to the Preservation Trust. The 356 being on the Lopez Hill Addition property, and then the 428 in 2023 being for the Buck property or Katy Mountain Development property on San Juan. Otherwise, obviously, we've got this kind of placeholder for grants. That's for water rights purchase at Cascade Creek. We have actually on that note heard that it does look like that sale is going through. And we have been in contact with the representative for the buyers who's very interested in talking about a sale of the water rights sale. So that's looking more and more real. So that's great. Otherwise, we don't have any state grants in here. I'm anticipating that we will be applying for some, but nothing is real enough in that regard to put into a budget at this point. So given that, I think if we just scoot down here to the restricted acquisition reserves, it's important to keep in mind that you see these numbers, they're large numbers, but what's not in here are potential acquisitions that we've been talking about. We haven't been able to put those numbers in because we don't have contracts. We're still in negotiation, but the commission is certainly aware that there are a number of things that are on the table. But I just wanted to call your attention to that number because almost certainly we'll be knocking that down a bit, particularly if we do some of the bigger projects that we've been talking about. And we'll come back to that and projections through 2026 when we get into the executive session. So I don't know if you've got, wow, this is amazing. Are there other questions about the Conservation Area Fund budget?
Try to hit escape button.
What's that?
Hit your escape button. Maybe that'll work it. Get it to stop.
Well,
Your
that
keyboard.
I did. And
Lincoln,
yeah,
Lincoln, I do have a statement with regard to expenditures under the bond repayment. When I talked to Aaron on Wednesday, the number 1,302,202 jumped out at me, and Aaron explained that that's not just bond repayment, but it's also the loan from stewardship that was included in that category. So that's why there's, the other is our regular bond repayment, which is pretty close to the same number, but that number there includes the stewardship loan. So if anybody had a question as to why that's so much bigger, that's the explanation.
so other questions on the Conservation Area Fund budget?
I have a quick question, Lincoln. On the administrative expenses, does that figure include, there was a comment made on the survey about having a more frugal budget related to graphic design and branding, et cetera. Aren't all those expenses included, or I should say, are all those expenses included in the admin expenses?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's always, it was interesting to see that comment because a lot of that is around the annual report and getting that out to everybody, basically. But that is an important piece of our communication. And we are obligated to do an annual expenditure and acquisition plan, report to the community, et cetera. So the annual report is the form that's taken, and it just costs money to do it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think it's great. It's part of that 10% that we set as a goal to stay below that. And so I think it's great. I was just wanting to know where those figures, those particular expenses were showing up. So,
Right. And so you can see the administrative percentage of net revenue,
mhm,
this line.
exactly.
We're well below that.
Very
Yeah.
low.
I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
So other questions on the conservation area fund? All right, let's move on to yeah, so just to reiterate that point, this is the total administrative percentage over the life of the program, the average. Okay, the stewardship and management fund budget. I actually, on the conservation area fund, we do have one other issue to talk about, but I'm going to come back to that after we go through the stewardship and management fund budget. Here, I think there were some questions last time about the expenditures. I think the income is relatively straightforward. Here's the endowment transfer number on this line. So we do two things. One is that transfer to endowment, and one is covering actual stewardship operations costs. And you can see that this number has gone up significantly from our 2020. Well, there we go again. No, that's not what I want to do. From the 2020 to the 2023 budget. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what's actually happening and why we're seeing those increase in expenditures. And apparently also to draw blobs on the screen for you to look at. We did a highlight, which is something we really, this is kind of the first time, and I'm sure this is going to be difficult for you all to read on screen, but you do have this, you should have this in paper form. But for the first time, we've really started to break down these costs. In the past, we've had a cost for management and maintenance, and we've had one for site enhancement, and we've really thrown some numbers in there that are kind of generic numbers. So in the past, you see those budgets and it'll have 100,000, let's say, for site enhancement. And maybe that's broken down by district. But this time, we're getting much more detailed, and we'll continue to do this to show much more detail on exactly where we're spending money. So a lot of that increase is in these kinds of projects. And so for 2022, you'll see some big differences between districts, obviously, but also some big differences in the type of projects that are being proposed across districts. So for District 1, we're really in this position of trying to get a couple of preserves open, in particular Beaverton Marsh. And also Katy Mountain really is another one that we're talking about. And both of those will almost certainly be opened. Katy Mountain's never been open to the public, but it almost certainly will be in 2023. In Beaverton Marsh, we have had a small area that's open to the public, but obviously we've expanded that preserve significantly. And one of the big things is connecting it via boardwalk across the marsh to town. So that's where you see that 250,000 number for 2023. That's basically a projection of how much that boardwalk's going to cost. But all told, basically, we've got a lot of infrastructure projects, public access infrastructure projects in District 1. And I'll say Zylstra, probably we don't have it all in there. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to come back to the dam issue, that state program that we were hoping would help us defray costs for looking at water rights and for potentially doing dam maintenance. It appears we're not eligible for. So we're coming back to the drawing board with that.
That damn maintenance.
That will mean more costs at Zylstra. And then at Mount Grant, we've been deferring creating a new trailhead, just trying to figure out what's going on. We ideally would like to remove the trailhead from its existing location, which is on the neighbor's property and that service area easement, and create another trailhead, another parking area, one where we can create a better experience for people. But we're just not to the point where we're sure where that's going to go. So all that being said, actually, I'll touch on one other thing, because I know we've got a member of the public here who is listening in specifically for this. The numbers for Mount Ben, we've had those kind of on hold for some time. I'm not anticipating we're going to be doing any of that. It could be we've been exploring other options there to try and get public access, most notably trail easement from the west side. So those numbers are just kind of in a holding pattern. So that's District 1, where we have a lot of public access infrastructure projects going. And again, the anticipation is we'll get through those. This is a pulse rather than a continued expense, but we'll get through those expenditures and get these preserves open. Obviously, having more property means we're going to have to do more, but once we get past this construction of infrastructure so that we have trailheads and existing trails and things built to accommodate visitors, then we're not going to have that same level of expenditure going forward year to year. In District 2, you see something quite different. Obviously, it's a lower number overall, but there are a few things happening here. And one of them is that number you see here for forest assessment. We have an assessment on turtleback currently, which we're rolling out to you all to look at. It's kind of overwhelming, frankly. But we're going to look at the other forest properties that we have as well. All of that with an eye toward doing forest management to help to make sure that our properties are more resilient in the face of climate change. So there's a lot more in District 2 that's going into actually assessing. And then in 2023, we've got this large number here for forest management on preserves. And that's where we take the assessments and we start doing some of the activity, which in large part will involve significant thinning across those preserves. I would expect that as we pass through in District 1, this big pulse of infrastructure projects, that number will come down significantly, but then we'll be doing some of the things that we're doing in District 2 in District 1. In fact, that's already started with the landscape scale restoration grant, which we're receiving. So we're doing work both at Mount Grant on the west side of the property, where there's some fairly large areas of very thick stands that need attention, and also on Turtleback. But we'll be expanding that to other properties on San Juan without doubt. I will say that we have this number in here. I do think that we're going to have a significant opportunity to find resources to cover those costs. So while we have a budget number in here, we don't have a revenue number associated with it because we just don't know at this point. But as with the landscape scale restoration grant, I think that's the first of a line of grants that we're going to receive, or at least I'm hopeful of that, as we work our way more into this climate resilience type of activity. That's kind of what I wanted to go through with you all. I don't know if you have questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I love this breakdown. And so when you say we're going to continue to do it this way in the future, will you be replacing these estimated figures with actuals like we do for the general budget so that we can actually see, or is that too much?
Well, we'll certainly be replacing, as you well know, Krista, that we do these annual budgets and now we're in a biennial budget.
Right.
It's hard enough with the annual budget to come up with numbers that are realistic.
Mhm.
We've got a sense of what's happening with stewardship projects, et cetera, but things do happen through the course of the year. We always end up doing amended budgets. Usually that's for acquisition projects that come along, but we also do it for stewardship projects as well. That's what happened with this fourth amended budget that we looked at last time. For this year, we had an increase in stewardship expenditures. So yeah, absolutely. As we get closer and things get clearer, where estimates become not just rough estimates, but bids from contractors, and we identify sources of revenue, we'll absolutely be adding those into the budget.
Yeah. I wouldn't request that they be done as often as we tend to amend budgets for big projects like a new acquisition, but even at the end of the biennial cycle, that we look at this and figure out what we actually did spend, looking at what we thought we would spend. This kind of speaks to what I think David has been asking about at a couple meetings on finding out where we're actually spending money and are we spending enough money or whatever. So I guess now that we have this template, it would be nice at least every 2 years to go back and look at what we projected it would cost and to try to put in some figures that reflect what it actually did cost. So that would be one question. And then that would be great if we could do that. And then I would just ask that we total these columns. If Aaron, this is an Excel, if you can just run a total at the bottom of each of these columns so I don't have to go through and do that just to satisfy my OCD, whatever. I need to know what. And then if we can get Lopez over 100,000 just to get at the big kids table for improvements, that would be great. We come in at barely 50,000 for 2 years. So, and our brothers and sisters are coming in a bit higher. So we don't have to spend money needlessly, but I'm just going to put a pitch in there for Lopez. But I love this format. Thank you so much. It's really helpful.
I'm going to put in another pitch for what I mentioned earlier, which was looking at putting some of this LGIP money to better work. I mean, we could pay for some of these stewardship projects with the deltas. You know, if we look at $1 million in a 0.09 LGIP situation annualized, we're looking at $900 in interest. If we just put that into a 2-year treasury, we might be able to get 0.5%, which is $5,000 on annualized on $1 million. That's over $4,000 in additional interest income. We do that a couple times over the next couple of years. We can, you know, we can pay for a little bit of these stewardship expenditures. I just think we really need to be. I'm not saying that you're not on top of this, because you're probably looking at it all the time, but I'm just going to put my voice in there saying, you know, the difference between 0.09 and 0.5 can be significant, even though it doesn't sound like much. When we're talking about $500,000 or $1 million of stewardship funds into something that just bumps those numbers up a little bit in terms of interest income. And I'll shut up about that. But I just think it's important to really be on that stuff.
So,
Always understood
other-
that- I've always understood that cash that we're investing is really constrained by whatever the rules are, but the LGIP is kind of what we can do.
No,
Jim,
we
I
can-
think is the,
we can do
what else can we
treasury.
do?
We can do, and we have done treasuries and CDs.
Yeah, I mean, it just, yeah, I think what Jim, what you're saying is that instead of having cash at 0.09%, it's better to spend it on something and increase value somewhere else. And I agree. It seems like we're just losing money if we're making that level of interest on it.
Yep.
The one issue with treasuries is that money is tied up for a lot longer. And in terms of the LGIP, we could see a significant interest rate increase in that span of time. So it's definitely a conversation to be had. You know, there has been significant dip. We do see I do get, you know, a report and an update based on what the, you know, Federal Reserve Commission projects for interest rate increases. And there are a few members of that commission that do see LGIP increasing in rate in a much shorter span of time than if we were to tie up more money into treasuries. But
So
again, these are all things that are up for
If
discussion.
LGIP goes up,
Oh, I'm gonna stop for a second. I think this is important, but we have so much. If maybe Jim could work with Aaron, Jim, David, and continue this further. But since we have to get through a couple more things with the actual, how it looks on paper with the budget part of it, and you guys work on the investment. I think what Jim's bringing up is really important, but I want to make sure we get through what we're required to get through here today, if that's okay. Brian, yeah.
Lincoln, I have a question too, or a comment. Pardon me. I'm guessing that you budgeted these projections before we got the reserve study on Kaufeld back. And that study shows projected capital and repair costs. And it fronts a lot of those costs into the first year, which I'm not sure how important that is, how we amortize them over time, but you might want to take a second look and incorporate those costs, which are significant. And I understand that some of them will hopefully be defrayed in part by the rent on the farm, but we need to consider those in the.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we are still digesting that reserve study and have some comments to go back and forth with the appraiser on. But that front-loaded number really does seem to be somewhat overreactive, I would say. There's a lot of money in there, for example, for fencing, which does not have to be done in year one. So I think we can spread those costs out to a great degree. And Peter, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that.
Yeah, we're working towards the final version, and that'll be distributed somewhat.
Has that report gone out to the whole commission? I haven't seen that report. I saw in the stewardship report that Peter got it, but I haven't seen it.
It's final draft. You'll get it in a few days.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we just wanted him to make some revisions to make it a little bit clearer, and we do a couple of things before we distribute it.
Okay.
So that's what we're doing.
I might also comment that with regard to Caulfield Farm, I did ask Aaron with regard to the electrical issue there, because I think that seems to be a primary issue that we need to deal with. Sandy raised that earlier. And Aaron told me that in the $45,000 item under capital improvements, that the electrical is covered in that category. I didn't see it anywhere specified, but apparently that's part of capital improvements that will be done.
I can address that. I mean, the number from the electrician who reviewed the property is a little higher than that, and it's our highest priority to implement that work as soon as possible. So we'll have to revise the budget a little bit to match whatever our final numbers are there.
Yeah, when we talked with the LUMs, that was a pretty important item that they identified as far as what needed to be done.
So if we're going to receive this report shortly, will we have this on the agenda for the next commission meeting to discuss it?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
So other questions about stewardship and management?
Question, I'm wondering where, or if it's included in the stewardship budget, soils amendments or any work on soils on our agricultural properties. I didn't see anything listed. But I saw it in the narrative, the memo that you had that said that was a big part of this. Is that included in here and we're not seeing it, or?
It should be. Aaron, I don't know. Can you take a stab at that one?
Yes, let me make sure. I have to look at this a little bit closely. I do have it broken out. I'm not sure if it is specifically included in here, but I did have it broken out for the actual budget to create those line items. So I can definitely get that to you and share it amongst everyone. Just off of the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me, so I can get those to you. Yeah.
Sandy, at least for Caulfield Reserve, that was a little later in the management plan implementation timeline. I think we'll wait for the longer term lease to be in place before we start budgeting for that.
Got it. Yeah. I figured Caulfield we're still in a little bit of a holding pattern, but I didn't know if the other preserves what we were doing. So I just want to make it's not really a question, but just a comment and a request. So when I first received the budget, this proposed budget, which is the first time we've seen it in detail, and when you see it in detail, that's when you know what questions to ask. And so when I saw District 1 being so heavy in infrastructure and public access projects, I'm wondering, where is the balance between that type of work and a habitat restoration? And I had, so I spoke to Lincoln and I talked to the stewards as well to get a better understanding. And I just wanted to point out some things I learned. One is this spreadsheet we're looking at is not a complete picture of really what's taking place on the ground. For example, staff time isn't in here, and it's a lot of staff that works on weed pulling. So staff and volunteer hours, people hours are not in here. So that's one point. Another thing is grant money that we receive for projects, for restoration projects, isn't in here either. So I don't know that we can ever really have a complete picture, but I wanted to just impress that I don't know if there's a way visually, or if we need kind of an overall policy or some way to address, so we can feel, how do we feel comfortable that we have a balance, if the goal is a balance between actually stewarding the lands and doing infrastructure. I think it's worthy of a topic in the future. But that's one thing I learned, that it's not a complete picture. So
Sandy?
let's see. Yes.
I want to say that I think we absolutely should have a complete picture of. I don't really know right now whether we're tracking information in a way that would even allow that. And I think that it is worthy of a further discussion. Because you have to capture the information in order to have it. And if we're not even capturing it, then we're missing an opportunity. It basically involves every hour that's reported by staff being marked to a specific project and a specific type of work, and every cost that comes in from an external supplier being handled the same way. You have to make the information pretty granular, but if you do, you can get a very detailed report, and it's a completely standard thing to be doing. So at some point, I think we should be talking about that, and I'd like to learn what level we're capturing at right now.
I would also like to add that ultimately, I think visually, the way to process it would be in something like whether it's a pie chart or something that kind of shows relationship of one area versus another. We can take it in by spreadsheet, but it's will be much better if once we get there, if we can see it in graph form. So let's talk about this in the future, of what level of detail we can. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I agree with both of you. And there's another aspect of this, which is that the budget, of course, is a public document, but I think it would be very useful for the public to know, and for us to let the public know about stewardship expenditures, because that's the only way that a lot of folks see that who don't necessarily see it on the ground, or don't recognize what we're spending time on, what we're spending money on. So this, I think, could be a very important part of our annual report, for instance, to let folks know what we are.
Okay. So we'll to be continued on that. Lincoln, do you want to discuss the is that germane before we talk about?
Yeah.
taking a public hearing and a vote.
Yeah, so we have a wild card this time around, which we've not had before. Namely, I was informed by the auditor on Tuesday evening that the way this budget process works, the Land Bank Commission recommends a budget to council. And then council can take an up or down vote on that budget. But the numbers get put into a different format by the auditor when they're presented to council. And when we're doing things that we have expenditures that are called out, for example, purchasing a piece of equipment or hiring a staff person, that gets put into what's called a decision packet. Not something that you all need to really have a detailed understanding of. But what's happened this time is that apparently the budget committee, and I'm not sure whether it's the auditor or the full committee, but in any case, she sent me an email noting that they were basically making a unilateral decision to increase the contribution to the stewardship endowment from the conservation area fund from 500,000 to $1 million for each of these 2 years. So this is problematic on a number of different levels. And so I think it's important that you all have some conversation about it. For one thing, well, let's put it this way. We talked to the budget committee about about the budget. We presented to them a couple of months ago, and there was some question about, why there wasn't more money going into the stewardship endowment. And I said, well, that's something the commission talks about all the time, and we have difference of opinion. We come to it, and they come to a decision about it, and we'll be doing that this time as well. Well, instead of really stressing that and making a suggestion that I could have brought back to the commission, this is kind of a unilateral decision, which gets automatically included in the budget that is presented to the council, which I'll be presenting to them on Tuesday. So the other issue is if this is possible, and the auditor is taking a stance that this is not actually a change in the budget because there's no expenditure, it's just a transfer. If this is permissible, then the budget committee really has the ability to make quite a number of changes after the Land Bank Commission has actually gone through and discussed a budget. And I think that can be quite problematic. So I wanted to just throw this on the table for your reaction.
So Jim, I see 3 hands up. Jim,
You want me to
go ahead,
first?
Jim.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw your hand go up pretty quickly.
I think that Lincoln is characterizing this appropriately, but I'm going to take it a step further, and I think that this is completely inappropriate. I think it's overreaching. I have had conversations with Christine Minnie and Mike Thomas about this particular issue, and stated where I'm coming from on this, and that these kinds of decisions should fall solely on the shoulders of land bank commissioners and the commission itself. And I'm trying to think of the motivation the auditor in the budget committee in making this unilateral decision. And I think that I'm guessing that this is because they are thinking ahead and thinking that if we sunset, the county's going to be strapped with all this land that we've purchased and want to make sure that it's being taken care of. And I assured Christine Minnie and Mike Thomas that I said we've got this. We talk about this all the time, as Lincoln said also, and that we have thought about this ad nauseum, because that's the last thing we want to do as a body, a governmental body, is not prepare for the future. And I basically told them that we have projected that our stewardship endowment will be at around a $10 million level in the end of 2026, when and if we were to sunset, that there would be 10, 15, upwards of 20 years of money there to run a scaled back stewardship program, and take care of these lands and allow for plenty of time to come up with some sort of scheme to move further down the road in an appropriate manner. I think that they just need to understand that this is part of our financial strategy, and that we are working on this and always have been working on this, and that for them to make some kind of unilateral decision without the commission's input, I think is very inappropriate. And I think we as a commission need to state that somehow to them. And one of the things that Mike Thomas had suggested is that perhaps Lincoln, we start out with maybe Lincoln putting together something that can adequately communicate these strategies that we have going forward, to make it clearer to the council and the other elected officials in county government that we are in fact competent and are thinking about this all the time and planning for it.
Thank you, Jim. Any other commissioners want to speak up about this?
Doug and Miles have their hands up.
Okay, thank you. Doug?
Yeah, I agree with Jim's comments. The other part of it is, it seems to me we have on our plate several projects. In fact, our projects sometimes take 2, 3, 4 years. And so in planning for those, one of the reasons why we've kept everything at 500,000 is that we've, especially for one project that we have proposed and are looking at on Orcas, we take that into consideration. And we had a discussion because Jim Skog and I know others, have thought the same thing about raising it from 500,000 to some other figure. And I think Lincoln very convincingly told us about the fact that, we're never going to have enough money to steward the property in perpetuity, but we certainly will have enough money to steward it for many years, and then other options can be looked at. So if we were going to look at doing it in perpetuity, then we might as well just stop doing what we're doing and put all the money into stewardship. The other thing is, this coming on Tuesday, before we have a Friday meeting, after this has been in the budget, it was in the budget last time, I think is somewhat disrespectful of the Land Bank Commission. And so I agree with what Jim was saying, that maybe the best thing for us to do in dealing with the council, they do have the last word, is to present to them what we have done over the years. For example, we have a policy of trying to keep the Conservation Area Fund at $3 million. Remember, after the Great Recession, it was very important for us to have that balance. Well, we've been keeping that. We've been keeping to that. We've had a number of meetings as to how we would staff the land bank if in fact we did not get reauthorized. We had special meetings with that regard. So there's many things that we have done to show that we are fiscally responsible. And I guess I was disturbed when Lincoln sent this to me, and I looked at all of the back and forth with Mylene and Mike Thomas, and I was really disturbed in terms of the process that was apparently being forced upon us. Because we have been so fiscally conservative, especially since the Great Recession and all the problems that we've had. So I'm not sure. I think that Jim's approach from the suggestion of Mike Thomas might be a good one, but I'm certainly interested in hearing what other people have to say about this.
Thank you, Doug. Miles, you had your hand up.
Yeah, well, I agree with Jim and Doug, what they said. I think that, sorry, I think it's somewhat arbitrary, the amount that they chose. Going from 500,000 to $1 million, like, I'm not sure what the basis for that is. And in the description, justification for it that they sent, part of it is that it was a really big year for the REIT. And so it seems like they feel that it's budgeted because there's a big REIT this year. But if this is supposed to be a permanent upgrade where there's now going to be a million transferred every year, what if there isn't a big REIT? And how's that going to affect our ability to do the rest of our mandate, which is to purchase land? So I feel like it's a little bit short-sighted on their part to arbitrarily pick that amount. And again, I'm not sure if it was meant to be intended just for this particular budget 2 years, or if it's meant to be long-term. But we might not have the resources in 3 years that we do now. So going up to $1 million and having to stick with that, it seems somewhat risky for our ability to do other parts of what the land bank is supposed to do.
Any other commissioners want to? Yes, David.
Yeah, so just for my information, who is the budget committee? Who's behind this decision?
So the budget committee is Mylene Henley, the auditor, Mike Thomas, county manager, Mark Tompkins, who's the deputy county manager and head of the health department. And then there are a couple of other folks out of the auditor's office who serve on the committee as well. But that's the basic composition.
I have a question. Sandy?
Go ahead. Yes.
So I agree with everything that's been said so far. And I guess what really gets me is that I just found this so out of order in terms of planning. Number one, I'm not sure where this has never happened since I've been on the land bank. And when I came on, I was taught that we develop our budget, work through our budget, and send it to council, and the council has the authority to thumbs up or thumbs down the whole budget and not line item projects, so that they can be gerrymandered or picked out, whatever, cherry picked. And they've always been supportive of the budgets that we have sent, and I think there's been really productive discussion in the past. And so I think, since we've worked so long and we do all these cash flow projections out so many years, and a lot of our decisions are based on that I find it really incredible to have a couple people decide that they can throw in a $500,000 change in your cash situation, even if it is just a transfer within the land bank funds. I just find that kind of astounding that they wouldn't think that would have some impact on the planning that went into developing the budget in the first place. And so, so the budget that we're approving is not the budget that's actually going to council if in fact this happens, and it leaves us in a potentially in a position to really have some major acquisitions messed up. So I just want to express just nothing that you're not all feeling, I'm sure, but it really just rattles my cage that that happened. And I think when they have picked, my understanding is too that we were, a purchase of a piece of equipment was pulled out, and we were told that we should continue to rent that. And that really is an itemizing detail that I think doesn't belong outside of the land bank's budgeting process. So I guess I would hope that when, I don't know, I'm not sure what we do now, but I would encourage all of us to be on the call Tuesday. That can be whatever we present to council, to kind of express to them our frustration and kind of request that they honor the system that's been kind of used in the past for us to present budgets to them.
Thank you, Krista. Brian, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, if I'm understanding this correctly, this has no impact whatsoever on the overall county budget. They're only messing with line items in the land bank's budget. And in fact, it has no overall impact in our budget, other than the fact that it denies us the right to buy that equipment. And it also basically messes with our investment plan. Is that basic?
Brian, are you asking,
Yeah,
it certainly does not have any effect on the county's general fund. And that's one of the reasons that the Land Bank Commission was set up, basically, and given some authority over the budget to make a recommendation to council that it's a separate funding source and it's a restricted funding source. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yes, it does. So I think that the points that everyone has made are good ones, and I will certainly write them in a letter to council.
David, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of
I
things.
know we're going over, I just want to point out, we're going over time, but this is critical discussion. So I'm just gonna let it go, and something
Very
else is
critical.
gonna get crunched. Yeah. So go ahead,
I mean,
David.
I think that it's a message from them to slow down the spending. And whether that's an expression of concern about whether we'd be reauthorized or not, I don't know. I do think it's pretty surprising. I wonder if other commissioners would like to jointly send a letter or some other communication to this committee and ask them to account for the.
Well, I would suggest that may be something that we think about. However, in the meantime, I think, as I've done, I reached out to Christine, who who I've known for a while, and I feel like my relationship with Mike Thomas is good, and so I reached out to them directly. I think that other commissioners should tap into those relationships and speak your mind. I think if we could approach the council and Mike Thomas from a number of different directions, I think that might get our point across. But I think this is a red line that's been crossed in my mind. Maybe, I'm trying to think of reasons or some kind of motivation for them doing this. And yeah, sure, on the surface, the county leadership is used to dealing with inefficiencies and other issues with other departments and commissions. And I don't put us in those categories because I think we are outstanding in the way that we do things and are very meticulous about our decisions. And in addition to that, which I think puts us on really good ethical standing, I also think that, this is a procedural issue that affects us, and that we are not like other departments and other commissions in county government. I think I agree with Doug that this is disrespectful. And I think we need to carefully but firmly say something about that.
Yes, David. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I hesitate to ask this, but is there any chance that they see having a big pot of money possibly useful to the county fund at some point in some way?
That's really, yeah, that's an impossible question to answer, honestly. But if you think about it in the context of there being a fund that's substantially larger than any other fund in the county, beyond the point where the land bank is reauthorized, so we've got a greatly reduced land bank staff. And the county is facing money problems. They can't really, I mean, they can and they do charge the land bank for services that they provide, like IT. They can't directly transfer money from this to some other interest. That's not possible. It could be, though, that they decide they've got a great opportunity to take out a loan from the endowment fund to fund some other project. They have to have a repayment plan, but their requirement for interfund loans and interest paid on those is that it's the LGIP plus a very small addition to that. So it's basically kind of like a free loan. So that's
There it is.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, that's
There
it.
it is.
Oh, God. That's hilarious.
Except it's not.
Doug, go ahead. I think.
My recommendation is we leave it as it is. But I would be interested in Lincoln's thoughts as to the best ways to communicate, other than leaving it as it is in the budget, the best way to communicate to the council.
Sorry, I missed the last part of that. Are you asking for a recommendation on how the commission should communicate, or to whom, about this?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that the appropriate thing is for commissioners to talk to council members. You're there to advise them on all things land bank. So that's the appropriate thing to do. The council has the final decision on all of this. So I think it makes perfect sense for commissioners to talk to their council members and tell them what they think about it.
So as a matter of procedure, if we're voting on a budget today, we're voting on the budget that we've created and not commingling or okay, good.
So we're taking out their decision package on this issue.
The decision package is not included in our budget. It's something that was to be added, or ordinarily, and in every other instance, that when the auditor reformats the budget for the council, it's exactly the same as what has come from the Land Bank Commission. So this is something that's just
I'm gonna
You
go on record saying that I think that this is a red line that's been crossed.
So the process for this is that the budget team for the county, Mylene and everybody else on it, is going to propose that they make this change. They're going to propose to the county that this change is made at the same time that we're submitting our budget, which is going to be different. So the county is going to have to decide which they go with. Is that correct?
That what the council will see is the budget that you have passed, but it's going to have that addition. And it will affect the cash flow, et cetera. So what they're going to see is essentially a budget that looks like it's come from the Land Bank Commission. They will see that the decision package on this extra 500,000 per year has come not from the Land Bank Commission, but from the auditor.
Could we put together, since I'm guessing that the auditor, Mylene, and that group is going to put it in a proposal as a group rather than, they're not going to do it individually. Mylene's not going to write to them individually saying it. Mike Thomas isn't going to do it individually. Can we do it as a group, as the commission, like have a letter that we all sign or something like that, saying the just of why we're not doing that? I mean, I'm fine doing it individually, like Jim's talking about too, but I don't know if it would help at all to do it as a combined effort and a single letter to say that we're not supportive of that decision.
You know, I think it just I don't know if I can comment on whether a letter would be better. I mean, personally, I think it'd be better just to have one-on-one exchange with council people.
Okay.
Lincoln, is it not appropriate though for us to charge you with the responsibility of making a statement on Tuesday that the budget that's being put forward by the auditor is not the budget that we voted on, and that we by consensus or vote just do not agree with that significant? It's not a $10,000 change to a budget, it's $500,000. I would like something on record at that meeting that says what they're being presented with clearly is not the budget that we were requesting their approval for.
Yeah, I mean, I will certainly be making that statement pending the outcome of your discussion and vote today.
Okay.
So the only thing that I wanted to add to that is I don't think at this point, well, it would be good to know what the really underlying motivations are, but I think at this point, even if I agreed with the recommendation, I would vote it down for procedural. I think it would set a precedent to open up to all sorts of changes, and we were created by the citizens of the county. We're not a public works department. We're a commission that has been appointed to represent the citizens of the county, and the ordinance says that this money comes in and the commission decides what happens to it. And so even though you can say that a transfer isn't an expenditure, it shows up as an expenditure on even their decision package and the spreadsheet. And so I think I agree with everything everyone has said. I feel that, yeah, I just agree. I'm going to plan on attending Tuesday to hear how this goes, and also reaching out to my counselor. But I think that I would hope that this wouldn't happen again in the future. Let's just say. Okay, so with that, I think, so let me just ask a question. Do we open up the public hearing before? So we would ask for a vote and then have a discussion. Does the public hearing come before both of those?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to open the floor up to any member of the public that would like to comment on the proposed 22-23 budget. Just raise your hand if you want to speak. Or unmute. Okay. All right, so I don't see anyone wanting to comment. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the budget, and then we will have discussion if needed?
I move to approve the budget for the proposed amended budget for 2021, the proposed 2022 budget, and the proposed 2023 budget.
I will second.
Thank you. Discussion, any further discussion? All opposed? Well, I'm sorry, all in favor? I'm losing track here.
Aye.
Aye.
That's a trick question.
Yeah, any opposed? No. Okay, so the budget as presented today by the Land Bank is approved by the commission, and we will ask for council's approval on Tuesday. And so Tuesday morning is the council meeting. Would it be helpful for any additional commissioners to be present, Lincoln, or?
Well, I think having at least a couple of commissioners attending virtually would be important.
Okay, all right. I think Krista said she's planning on it. I'm gonna try to do it as well, so. Okay, why don't we just take a short 5-minute break before we move on to our next realm. So 10:24, let's come back let's get started by 10:30.
Note takers back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So we'll go ahead and restart the meeting again, and we'll back up on the agenda and do Lincoln's director's report with an acquisitions update.
Great. Yeah, I do have a couple of things. I can go over these relatively quickly here.
Are we recording the meeting again?
Yes. Meeting is being recorded. That's not what I wanted. So first of all, an update on the acquisition of the Higgins property on Lopez. We've had a negotiation session. We've agreed on price on this property, and the conservation fund looks like it's in position to make the actual acquisition. So we had a call with Mark Ellsbury from the Conservation Fund and Skeet Townley from the BLM yesterday. The idea here is that the Conservation Fund would purchase the property and then resell when BLM has been able to get funding through the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund. I think that's all on track. The great news here is that the property is going to be conserved. I mean, it's just, I'll let you know when it's 100%. We do not yet have a signed contract between CF and the seller, but we have verbally agreed to terms. The great news is that assuming that happens, this property is protected. As you all know, we've got $1.58 million budgeted for this project. And we will not have to spend any of that money. So it doesn't get any better than this, frankly.
And we won't be managing it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's all for that one for now. I wanted to come to San Juan to touch on one project here. This is just to show you what's kind of in play on San Juan with some of the larger properties. And some of these are familiar to you, some of these are not. The one I'm going to talk about is this one here. But you can see the Hauschka property is here. This is the other Hauschka property where we're waiting for the Hauschkas to come back with an idea of sales price before we start in on negotiating with them again. And then this is the Lawson Pond property where that one has been embroiled in a lawsuit. So we've been kind of waiting to see what happens, and no decision's been made on that either. But we have had a request from a landowner, and I will say the landowner has gotten some letters of support, which I've failed to advance to you, but there are 5 or 6 letters of support for this acquisition, and that's this 10-acre piece right here. It's just moving in a little bit closer. So this is the existing Katy Mountain within that green boundary. And the small property is what we're talking about right now. In this case, the Smalls own 2 properties. They're retaining this one, which Tom Small and his wife own. This one Tom owns with his siblings, and they want to sell. So that's created this situation. And we've been talking about a potential conservation easement. Their proposed listing price, as far as I understand it, is $300,000. So conservation easement would be in the nature in a forever wild conservation easement would be in the neighborhood of let's say 200, something like that. This is a close-up of the property, just showing you exactly what we've got. I apologize, I don't have any photographs on the ground, but this is Katy Mountain Road, which comes out here, and this is Tom's workshop. His house is over here, but this is the parcel we're talking about. So it's got the road on this side. The neighbor to the south has a driveway which comes down through here. They have an easement. This is land bank property. This is land bank property. So the parcel is adjoined on 2 sides by the preserve. And these folks down here, I'll just go back up. So these 2 properties are owned by one couple, and that driveway comes down like this. And there is some potential for them to do a conservation easement and only develop one of these 2, but we've not come far on that discussion. What we've got is really this property in question. What I've communicated to the owners after talking about it with San Juan commissioners is that, you know, we're not disinterested in this because it is adjacent to the preserve. But I think spending that much money at this point in time when we have all of these other projects up in the air is going to be difficult. But I wanted to bring this to the full commission to just get your reaction. That's it. That's my end of my spiel.
Well, with regard to this property, it's just not a high priority from my standpoint. 200,000 for a conservation easement for a piece of property that's got a couple roads through it. It's just not a high priority for me personally.
I agree with Doug. It doesn't feel like a high priority. I have a bias against easements, I think, at this point in my limited experience. So I'd rather probably proceed elsewhere.
Anybody else?
Jim, are you on the line? Is he there?
Wow, did we lose Jim?
We might have lost him. I would defer to the San Juan commissioners.
Does that seem to be a consensus among everyone? Oh, there's Jim. There he goes. He's going off into space.
I would agree with, I would also defer to the San Juan commissioners, but even so, agree with David on the conservation easement. Makes sense for just right now. I don't think would make sense for us, and especially in light of, we don't know what's going to happen if we're going to lose $500,000 in our expenditure account. I think anything else on the line that's not already budgeted for we should take a hold until we see how that shakes out. But I would agree with the San Juan commissioners too. Not a high priority for them, then it isn't for us, for me either.
I'm fine waiting on this, and I think having driveways and roads going through it is complicated, so.
Okay. I see frozen people, so I don't know if you can hear me, because everybody.
Can hear you.
You can, okay. All right, good. Wait,
That I see frozen people, is that like the
was
I
it,
see
Yes.
dead people?
It's
did I
the,
miss?
it's the Zoom sense. Yeah.
Jim, did you have anything else you wanted to add about the small property potential conservation easement?
Well, I had a discussion with Lincoln yesterday, and let's wait and see. If they're gonna list it, they're gonna list it, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right,
So yes, Lincoln, I think. Go ahead.
I'll stay in touch with them, and I'll also, I will talk to the landowner to the south to see what they're thinking. That could change the picture if, for example, they wanted to donate a conservation easement on the 10 acres directly to the south. Then certainly there'd be some significant added value there, but I'll report back to you.
Okay,
And
thank
that's it.
you. So that's it for this part.
Yep.
Stewardship report, we're going to hear about the Turtleback Forest Assessment update.
Well, I'm happy to talk about that. I feel like Lincoln, covered it to some extent, but yeah, I guess just reiterating that, this was an assessment done in 2020 by Range Shadow Consulting using funds from the San Juan Preservation Trust Stewardship Endowment for Turtleback. And it, revisited plots from our 2020 forest or 2010 forest inventory, added additional plots. It encompassed the whole Turtleback Preserve plus Turtle Head. And ended up, in our request to Range Shadow when we set out to do it was to, look for ways to include or to improve climate change resiliency, adaptation, to look for ways to enhance habitat, forest habitat, fire, address fire risk reduction potential. And they completed the study. It was a pretty exhaustive project and came up with a number of recommendations ranging from expanding fire breaks that currently exist to some extent on roads and trails. So bringing those up to modern fire break standards, pushing back encroaching conifers from high priority Gary Oak and Rocky Bald habitats, and then more conventional forest thinning. And, it's an ambitious plan. It is tiered to some extent, tier 1, tier 2, in terms of time. We recently applied for and received a $30,000 grant of DNR funds in collaboration with the Conservation District. So our goal with those funds is to implement some demonstration projects over the next year and, basically pick a couple of high priority areas that are visible and demonstrate some of these forest management practices that are recommended in the plan on small scales with lots of outreach beforehand, some signage at the sites, and really just hopefully to educate folks and demonstrate the kind of things we want, the kinds of things we want to do, and give people a firsthand experience of, the level of disturbance, which shouldn't be dramatic, but, and then as funds and capacity allow, just slowly work through those priority areas over the next decade. So, and then as Lincoln said, we're looking to repeat that assessment across the other Orcas preserves to see, get a handle on what conditions are and what management actions should happen. I'm just waiting for what we call the final report. I think we're there, but and then that report will be made available to the public here very soon, in a matter of a few days, I think.
Peter?
Yes.
I just had Carson do about 3 acres of fairly significant thinning and reduction of fuel load, ocean spray, et cetera, on a parcel over by Turn Point. And I also have many examples on other property that I manage of forestry thinning and other, Carson Springer work that, is 2, 3, 4, 5, even more years down the line from being done. And, it's possible that, I could take a small group with owner approval to take a look at some of that too, because that's, we've been doing it for years. This particular one we just did over off of Turn Point was, for the owners and for the neighbors who were concerned about fire danger. Of course, it looks like a bomb went off right away, but 6 months down the line, it looks fantastic. So anyway, I just wanted to offer that up as a potential should a small group of people want to see that, rather than spending a bunch of money with Carson doing demonstration projects. I don't know. I mean, it's not cheap, that's for sure.
Well, thanks for that offer. Yeah, I mean, the funds will be used to do work that we want to do anyway. It's just that we would do small scale samples with some outreach, just to, so people can see firsthand. But I appreciate the offer, and I'd be interested in coming over and taking a look.
Yeah, I could
others
walk
would.
you through a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, we've done 5-acre parcels, 10-acre parcels. We've done, these are people with lots of acreage and are interested in healthy forests.
I would just point out also that Turtleback is enrolled in the FSC program, Forest Stewardship Council program, and we're required to have a forest management plan up to date. And this basically satisfies satisfies that requirement. And, you know, I think folks should just be assured that this will happen. This kind of work will happen slowly over quite a long period of time. It's not, the work doesn't need to happen everywhere on the preserve. And, you know, it'll be done carefully and, you know, within the bounds of of the FSC, you know, rules, and, you know, with public access in mind while it's happening, that sort of thing. So more to come on it.
Any other questions for Peter? I'll have a comment. Your idea of doing can everyone hear me? Because I'm frozen. You're
Yes.
frozen. Okay,
We can
thank you.
hear you.
Sorry to keep checking. I really like your idea of outreach on to do the smaller projects and then doing outreach. I think it's so I'm just finishing a book on healthy forests called Finding the Mother Tree, explaining about all the mycelia networks and what it takes for healthy forests. And I wonder if the outreach could be not just about what we're planning to do there on Turtleback, but if there's a way, do we have capacity to do any educate a little bit deeper education of what makes up a healthy forest, and perhaps to encourage homeowners to follow these same practices if and when they are working on their forests, and how to balance priorities between fire risk but still maintaining habitat. I just wonder if there's capacity to kind of expand on that outreach.
I mean, I would just comment that the conservation district is, you know, pretty active in this area, and I plan to do at least one presentation with staff from the conservation district and Rain Shadow, kind of a general educational presentation on forest management, but focused on Turtleback. So, I mean, I think there's more we can do, but can't speak for others.
Right, okay, great. All right. That concludes the stewardship portion of it. And now Tanya for outreach and volunteer report.
Awesome. Oh. I'll be brief. I was gone on vacation, which is in the report. So we do have working on a story walk at Zylstra, which is in combination or in partnership with the San Juan Island Library. That will happen in November. There should be some press coming out soon on that. And also the communications subcommittee. I might just mute those folks. Sorry about that. The communications subcommittee has been working on the upcoming community conversations, which we found out November 10th is a good date. And we have a topic, and I'm gonna get my notes, which is we're going to work on the acquisition matrix and share some clarity about decision-making processes on how the commission chooses properties, which kind of touched on a little today as well. This time around will be a county-wide Zoom meeting. And we're looking forward to also having breakout rooms at the end, where we hope to have a more personalized conversation with the public. I'm hoping all the commissioners will be able to attend and host one of those rooms, and we'll have specific topics that we'd like some public input on so that we can have a a little better communication and then bring that back to the commission and then talk about that at a later date as well. Maybe some retreat ideas will come out of it. I'm not sure, but it should be, be good. And
Tanya,
Yes, sir.
sorry, I have a question.
Mhm.
Is the community conversation now an all districts, all islands conversation? I thought I had understood that originally that we were going to have a community conversation for each district.
well, so we had done that in the spring. INSO had 3 separate for each district, and then we chose the fall for just one meeting for the county-wide. And so next spring we'll go back to a district centered and follow that format.
We did that in the spring?
In April.
You were part of that. We did Orcas,
Okay.
right? You were there, I think.
All right.
I remember it.
I remember.
Seems like a long time ago, but it did happen.
Probably feels like years ago.
I'm looking toward the future.
Perfect. So that's the communication subcommittee is still working out some of the logistics. I'm working out some of the Zoom logistics, but press will go out soon because we are quickly coming up on that. But I do appreciate that you noticed last time that the date was in question and we got clarity on that. So we're going to stick with November 10th and just hopefully everybody can share with their networks and spread the word.
So that is before our next commission meeting. Are we going to have any further preparation for that, or at least, know more about the format?
Absolutely. I'll get that out once we'll have a brief meeting, I think, with the committee just to finalize a few questions, and then I'll get that all out to the full commission for sure. And we can have a practice run as well, just to make sure, everything's working well. I would appreciate that only because I'll be in the background facilitating and there's always surprises.
Yeah, great, thanks.
And that's all I really have right now.
Tanya, did you also want to mention that the Polis press release that we haven't seen that come out yet? That's from, I think,
Oh,
Kai
that's right.
and
Thank
his
you.
team. We're going to do that so that we can get the results out to the public. So I'm wondering if we can find out if he doesn't have time to do it, then it seems like we should do it and have the link available to the report.
So I did hear from Kai, and I'm
Okay.
sorry, I thought that got that email off. He has a press release that he's finishing up, and he said he anticipates to have that out,
okay.
I think, within the week. So it's probably difficult between school and a time difference, but it was my impression that we should see that within the week. And that was, I think, yesterday or the day before. So we're all set.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. Let's see, 10:58. So we are now commission is now entering into executive session under the provisions of RCW 4231N to discuss the purchase or sale of real estate. So we're going to stop the recording and ask the members of the public to step out of the meeting. And then we will come back by 11:30 and discuss future agenda items.
I don't see anybody in the waiting room.
Okay. All right. So future agenda items, I have quite a few stacking up here. And so we may need to prioritize what we're going to be meeting about next month. I'll tell you what's on my list, and then you tell me if there's anything else. So one thing is the agricultural goals and policy document that was getting edited that needs to come back to us for final approval. Will we be able to have that report or recommendation soon, Lincoln?
Yeah, we should be able to. I'll check in with Charlie. He's been, the stewardship staff have been pretty harried trying to get projects done as it's starting to rain and we get shut down on things. So, but I'll check in with him.
And then the rent and reserve study for Kaufelt. Those two things are related to agriculture. And I believe that we said we wanted to kind of solidify our goals and policy before we went on to make decisions about Kaufelt. So, but we may need to address both of these at the next meeting. Then the other thing we talked about was once finding out about the requirements for a new commissioner, did we want to have further discussion on that? And then another one, and this can maybe get punted down the road since we have more pressing ones, is how we can look at stewardship as an overall, how we can gather the whole picture so that we understand what funds are being spent on what, and if we want to have any sort of blanket guiding principles, we could talk about that. Those are all the things on my list. Does anyone have other items?
Was there going to be a special meeting to discuss Kaufelt Farm and the lease? Is that still on the schedule for some time?
We're intending on doing that. We have not scheduled it.
Is it, we're still waiting for the reserve study first? Is that? Yeah.
I think the lease discussion is a little bit premature at this point. We're not there yet.
Well, we talked about having a facilitated discussion on it. And we talked about possibly doing it in the evening and having it. I think that it could be a lengthy discussion. It's going to be more than what's going to fit into a standard meeting slot. We're not going to be able to do something in a half hour. So we will need an extra meeting. So perhaps, but maybe we can clarify any questions on the reserve study during a regular meeting, and then have the additional meeting focused on decision-making for how to move forward.
Right.
So maybe have that other meeting in December.
It seems like a tough month to have a,
Yeah.
but we've got a process moving along. So I think we can do it or need to do it. Latest would be January. We're kicking we're pushing our schedule there.
Yeah.
But we haven't scheduled it yet because we didn't know when we needed all the information. So we only are just now getting the reserve study and the commission hasn't had a chance. So why don't during the next meeting, after we have had that and hopefully had the draft agricultural goals and policy, and at the next meeting make a decision on how we're going to move forward with a larger discussion and when that's going to take place, and is it during daytime or night?
Have we scheduled a retreat? Are we actually having one? I thought we had decided we might make it part of an all-day retreat.
We have not scheduled a retreat yet. At this point, that would have to be in December also.
Is there a possibility for moving the December meeting up from the 17th to the 10th and make that the retreat? Or is that too soon after the other, just to kind of get it away from the holiday craziness? And would we be ready by the 10th to discuss Caulfield as a whole if we discuss the reserve plan in November? Or maybe we don't have a retreat, or maybe we each have private retreats at home by ourselves.
So one thing I think is important is that I hear your question before we get to that. I think that we need to get out in the public as the final draft ag goals and policies and ask for public comment, just like we do on a stewardship and management plan. And I think when the reserve study changes are completed, that document should be available for the public as well, so that by the time we get into a discussion, we've had the ability to receive some public input to it, as well as then testimony at the meeting. So what you're suggesting, Krista, moving our monthly meeting up, and it would be a monthly meeting followed by a facilitated retreat on a topic that we need to deep dive on.
No, I was just,
10th.
yeah, I'm not defining 2 meetings in December. I'm just, it would be the meeting that happens in December becoming a retreat meeting. So it is a full day retreat, not having 2 meetings in December.
Which is what we usually do.
Which is what we usually do. And then,
Can we do it in person?
oh, that'd be fun. I don't know.
I think Krista's suggestion makes a lot of sense, and that the timing seems to be right. At our next meeting, we could look at the reserve study and hopefully be ready to put it out to the public, so that by the time December rolls around and we have a retreat, we could discuss the ag policy and Caulfield in relation to the land bank's overall activities, and particularly in relation to the details of the stewardship program.
In person, December.
I have a question.
We have to be vaccinated, right?
Yeah, that's right. I have a question about putting the reserve study out. I mean, I don't mind making it public, but I don't know what input we want from the public on the study itself. I think we're looking at having potentially input on the ag policy, and then whatever we come up with as our decision to go forward with the lease agreement, what our concept is there, like a management plan, then having input from the public at that point. But I'm kind of hearing that we should be offering input on the reserve study from the public, and I'm not seeing the point.
So,
I wasn't suggesting that.
Okay.
So yeah, me neither. If it seems that way, then I misspoke. It's to get the information out, so that the public has the same information that we have, and they know the basis of our discussions and why we're coming to certain decisions.
Okay. I just misunderstood. Thanks.
So first we'd find out if December 10th if our retreat facilitator was available. That's a question.
You can check on that. Is this going to be in person or what? I mean, I do think if it's in person, we're going to have to make provision for people to attend at distance. And I'm not quite sure how we do that, but
No, if we do it in person, everybody has to be vaccinated, I think.
Yeah, but the public should have access remotely,
Well,
is what I think Lincoln's
yeah,
saying.
they can come, and if they're not vaccinated, they can log into it somehow.
Yeah, that's the somehow we need to figure out, I guess. And we need to have it public, big enough that the whole commission staff can attend safely and any interested public. So it would be a pretty big venue or sizable enough with the technology to allow people to attend remotely.
I
Good
feel like,
luck with that, Lincoln.
yeah,
I feel like it's a pretty lofty goal. I'm not sure it's worth trying to do right now.
Yeah.
all right, well, I'll check
Yeah.
with the facilitator and see what we've got there.
Well, I think as a discussion, as a future meeting topic, future agenda item, I think when are we going to get back to meeting in public should be one of them.
Well, I think we're waiting for somebody to point out that there's an easy venue for us to use for this that fits our schedule. I mean, as I understand it, council chambers is possibly the one place, or there's one place set up for this. Maybe the Lopez Library is another. I don't know.
I don't think either of them are big enough.
Well, council's doing theirs, and they're doing it a combination of remote and present, live, whatever. And so there must be they must have figured that out, that they only allow so many people into the chamber office, and then the chambers council room, and then everyone has to be remote. The conflict we have is the planning commission uses that chamber the same Friday of the month that we do. So somebody would have to give that up. But I think since council's doing it in some kind of a hybrid fashion, that we would be able to do it using that facility if we could get a day.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if we're talking about having a minimum of 18, 19 people before we even talk about the public.
Yeah.
Well, you could theoretically say that only the commission and director are going to be there in person, staff could be remote, and public could have whatever space is left. I just foresee a technological hurdle there in terms of figuring out how to do it. It's been hard enough to just do a Zoom webinar.
Yeah.
Took Tanya quite a bit of time working on that.
Well, we can investigate it, and I don't know. We'll let Tanya decide.
Okay, so were there any other suggestions for next month's agenda or other future agenda items? I think we have plenty. All right. So with that, then
I have a
I
quick
can't believe
question.
it. I'm adjourning right at
No,
11:45.
don't adjourn yet. I have a quick
Okay.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick.
No,
So I'm just,
No, I didn't.
okay, I'm curious about the Higgins property, Lincoln, in terms of our not being responsible for management. So if the conservation whoever they are, fund, takes it, but it's eventually going to go to BLM so from the time of that sale, who is maintaining it then? Is that going to be articulated in someone's document or what?
Well, the Conservation Fund will own it. In the negotiations with the family, the idea came up that maybe in the 2 or 3 year period of Conservation Fund ownership, the family members who've been living there could stay on as caretakers for that period. But the Conservation Fund is going to be responsible for, managing the property during that interim period.
And then they would turn that responsibility over to BLM when. Oh,
Right.
okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't kind of left holding it until all that happened somehow.
No, we're not going to be, if this works, we will not be involved in this at all.
Great.
I think
Thank you. Thank you.
somehow when and if it works, we should still get a story out to the public. I think the public
yeah.
should be made aware of these other things that we/you do
Mhm.
to help conservation without spending our dollars.
No, we definitely are going to look for taking credit.
Okay, good. All right. Then with that, if there isn't anything else, we will adjourn the meeting and see you next month. But before we do that, okay, let me back up. It's not adjourned. Does anyone have a conflict on changing the 10th, changing the meeting from the 17th to the 10th? Reason being we should, we can talk about it next month, but if we have to publish the schedule, we should do it later. I'm okay with it. Brian is in favor. Krista brought it up, so,
I'm in favor.
We're talking about December?
okay.
I'm good.
I have no
December
idea.
10th. It's- Okay.
Sandy, just to add another wrinkle, maybe I shouldn't, but we talked about the possibility of using council chambers, except that Planning Commission uses it at the same time. Would it be possible to back it off to another day that week? Does that work or does that not work for anybody?
I don't think planning would be in there that Friday.
Yes, I didn't hear the question.
I think the planning commission is there the third Friday of the month. So if we move it to the 10th, we would get
Oh,
out of that
right.
conflict.
Right, good point, Krista. Yeah. So
Yeah.
council chambers.
Unless
may
they
be
do the
available.
same thing and move it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll pencil in the 10th and figure out details later.
Sounds good.
Right.
Where'd your go?
And I'll send you the link for the council meeting Tuesday.
Good.
Good job, everybody.
Andy just dropped out. Okay.
Nice to see everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
I guess
Anything
that's
else?
adjourned.
I guess that's adjourned.